All right. I am live with guest extraordinaire, Charles, although I'll probably call you Charlie Kibler, if that's okay. Is Charlie good?
Good. Charlie's good. Chuck's good.
All right. Perfect. Perfect. Now, right off the bat, we can see the Tennessee flag in the background. So that's your alma mater, right?
That's it. Good old Rocky Top.
Perfect. And then we're both fans of hats, and you've got even more in the background there.
I do. Some Civil War reenactor hats.
Love
and there's another one there, my Federal Forage cap.
I love that too.
Even
So
with
here's
the
what
little-
I wanted to talk to Charlie actually for quite some time. Charlie, and you correct me wherever I get any of these facts wrong, and I plan on letting you talk more than me. But the top tier board game wargaming artist, and the artistry goes back. When did you first start? I guess rather than me trying to peg it, when did you first get employed to start doing art for different war games or boards?
Employed would be early 81. I happened to come to Baltimore and just dropped by Avalon Hill. I actually dropped by the Reed Street location, I think, and because that's the only address I had for Avalon Hill. I think that's what they put on their games.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, but anyway, they said no. If you want to work in the art department, you got to go down to Harford Road or something. I may have that wrong. It's been too long, but at any rate, they happened to be needing an artist because they had a lady there, an older lady that was a ex-nun that was retiring soon. Yeah, I know. She was an ex-nun turned artist. Marge was her name. She's if you're familiar at all with some of the old ASL boards,
yes,
there's the boards 9, 10, and 11 that when they were originally done in the 70s, they were real monstrosities of art. And Marge was unfortunately responsible for those. Don said, because Don Greenwood was the one that had her try her hand at him. I think she actually asked him to, can I do the art for these boards instead of him sending them out to other people. So he said, yeah, and then he got them back from her and complete with fingerprints on them and the famous Christmas tree woods on one board that looked like a giant Christmas tree. And all different colored backgrounds like bright green to any rate, Don said he felt too bad to not print them, so he printed them anyway. But I remember when I first saw them, I said, "Oh my God, what happened to these things?" But I did end up getting those repainted a few years after I got to Avalon Hill. I said, Don, you need to let me repaint these 3 boards. So he did.
I love it. Now, did you just cold call show up, or had you commute? Oh, really? No.
It was I really wasn't expecting much, and I was really on my way to Boston because I was in commercial art or advertising art, and my sister lived in Boston. Baltimore was about halfway there from Tennessee, in East Tennessee, so I had stayed overnight in Baltimore, and I figured, I'll just drop by there and put in my resume kind of thing, which I did. To tell you the truth, I don't even know if I stopped by here going up to Boston or coming back, but I think it was going up. And then, I went to Boston, stayed with my sister, visited some ad agencies, put in my resume there. Also, no, I didn't go to New York. I'd gone to Atlanta too, to put in my resume to a few ad agencies in Atlanta. They say, "Oh, this looks great. We'll give you a call." So I knew that nothing was really happening on those things. And I never did get a call from anybody for those except at Avalon Hill.
Now, does Don end up having you do a little bit of like artwork for him on the spot, or did you just have samples? How did that come about?
I had a lot of samples, yeah. Like, artists guys travel around with this big, like a 4-foot by 3-foot fold out giant book that you put in poster size samples of your art. Some stuff maybe from college art classes, some stuff I had printed because I had worked after graduating college in late 70s. I did work for about a year and a half at a small ad agency in East Tennessee, my hometown, and around Kingsport, and Homer Advertising and Design. And
Really?
but I could see I wasn't going anywhere because he had a girl there that was very sharp. She did good artwork, and I was under her. I didn't mind it, but I could see there really wasn't any advancement. It's really a two people agency, and I was a third. So I decided after a while to try to get into a bigger agency in Atlanta, Boston, something like that. And I'll just stop in Baltimore because I picked up, I knew about wargaming, but just a few years on that actually too.
Now I'll come back to the wargaming, but we do have GK Rockover, if I've got that
Gary
pronunciation.
Crockover. I know
Gary.
Gary.
So it's Gary Crockover. Thank you.
Well,
And he says, "Hey, Charlie." Oh, well, there it is. I didn't even read his message. Gary Crockover here. Good to see you. How do you know Gary?
I'm not sure how we met. It might have been him testing Talonsoft games. Gary would know probably. Anyway, I actually went out to Gary's. We played Combat Mission a lot. Gary and I did the computer game, kind of ASL-y computer game.
Sure.
And Gary lives out in Austin, which is where my brother lives. And after playing a lot of Combat Mission with Gary, I went out there to Texas a few years, 15 years back, probably, actually for a job for Talonsoft because they sent me out there. No, it was for breakaway games out to College Station. We were working on a game for Incident Commander, a computer game. At any rate, Gary and I got together, got some good Texas barbecue and just said hey to each other after, dueling over the Combat Mission thing.
Beautiful.
So
I love it. Now, Combat Board Games says, "Afternoon, fellers." Chief, which is just my nickname. If you could ask Mr. Kibler, who is his favorite war game artist and graphic designer? Great question, because you're a lot of people's favorites, but do you have a favorite?
gosh, there's a few good ones. I mean, one of the first ones I even knew about was Roger McGowan. He's very good. He's probably the elder statesman nowadays. Mark Simonich does great stuff. A guy I really admire, Mark Mahaffey. I think he's a younger guy than me. He works for, a place. Anyway, Mark does some very good board game art and stuff. Map art especially. He's done some nice maps and stuff. So he's good.
Beautiful. And Gary says, yes.
You
met through Combat Mission. Now, on that note, so I will usually ask, and I'll ask this first, do you have a favorite board game that you play? So not on your art side, just like, what was your favorite, I guess, of all time? Do you have a favorite board game?
It would have to be Squad Leader.
Okay.
A la Advanced Squad Leader. That's really what brought me to Baltimore too, because when I got introduced to Squad Leader, I had graduated college and would go over to a friend's house that I went to high school with, and we'd get together. And an old college buddy of mine actually had this Squad Leader game. He said his brother had bought it and he didn't like it and he couldn't figure out how to play it, and he gave it to me. And I said, "Oh, this is like individual tanks and squads, like holy." Yeah, we spread it out, learned how to play it just through their programmed instructions there that the original Squad Leader game had. Played the hell out of it, just for every weekend I was over at his house playing and drinking and carrying on, and I even met my wife over at his house because my Squad Leader buddies, his wife was my wife's now older sister. So
really,
yeah, that's an interesting way. So
well, that's really cool. Did you guys end up going to college together too, or you just dated all through?
Oh, my wife and I didn't meet till after college. See, I wasn't going over to my high school buddies until I graduated college. I'd moved back home. I was working at the ad agency and looking for things to do on the weekend. And David and I'd probably get together and drink some beer. And David showed interest in playing board games and stuff. And so we were then playing the Squad Leader game a lot at his basement. He had a room where he reloaded ammo and this and that, and we'd set up the boards and keep his daughter out because he could lock the door. He had a 2 or 3 year old who's now about 40 or something, of course. But, so yeah, and then my wife would come over there because she couldn't stand being at home with her other little sisters and brothers, so she'd come over there. And she was a young girl then, especially young lady that attracted my eye.
Sure.
I guess she thought I might be a good haul too. But so
I love it. So I see it. I didn't even know. We talked a little bit previously. I didn't know how you'd gotten into working with Avalon Hill. And when they brought you in, were so you became their primary artist or sole artist, or how did that all work?
Yeah, they still had Dale Schaefer working, and really he was their dedicated artist, and he worked with the he was in the same spot that the game designers were, which was down on Reed Street in downtown Baltimore. I was at the Harford Road complex where they had the giant printing plant. Well, it was not giant, but it was the printing plant. It's a big low building, fairly large, you know, it was a warehouse kind of thing. And then they had a room for all the accountants in one place and the other people. Eric Dott ran the thing, and so they did a lot of printing for envelopes and other commercial printing.
Hmm.
Printing the Avalon Hill stuff was just one of their side things that they did. And I guess the story is back in the '60s. Avalon Hill, when Avalon Hill was an independent company, they got too much in debt with Monarch, so Monarch bought them out. So they kind of owned Monarch by the 1981 when I started working there. I mean, Monarch owned Avalon Hill. But anyway, to get back to the question, Dale Schaefer was the artist for the board games, and he was doing all the artwork for them. And I was really brought in there to do artwork to help Jean Baer, which was the lady that was the art director there, do envelopes and put on address for envelopes and do flyers for Fishman and Son carpet makers and or carpet distributors. I remember doing their little weekly or monthly flyers, one
Really?
color jobs. Or they like gimmicky art, and they could see from some of my stuff in my portfolio, Gene knew kind of some of the stuff I could do, kind of gimmicky, cartoony art. So they liked that. The Fishman did, and so I was really a commercial artist for them. But I also had a lot of illustrations in there because I like to draw pictures of German soldiers and Stugs and stuff. I had several artwork I'd done in college of tanks and this and that. So I think Don kind of saw that in my portfolio. Some of the illustrations, a lot of them were just pencil and charcoal and stuff of tanks and this and that. German soldiers retreating from Stalingrad. I got some on my walls up here still. But
Well, and a little bit too. I know we talked, and so you can't quite see it, but I'll open it up and get the maps out here in a bit. I know you've done, I don't know, has it been hundreds of maps or probably hundreds of maps at this point in your career? But
probably over
I'll
100
pull
or
these out because you did
the raid.
that beautiful map for St. Nazaire and Turning Point Stalingrad, and I'll get that out in a little bit. Now, before we get to that, though, we were just kind of touching base and testing connections on Wednesday, and you had mentioned that your work history, your life history, literally evolved from all your hand drawn, morphing right into all the computer drawn or graphic work that you do. I don't know how to explain it best, but could you explain more of that? Because you gave me insight I'd never even thought about when you started to talk about that.
Yeah, for instance, when I was going to college and picked up commercial art, I was originally in architecture, actually for the first couple years, and then I didn't like all the math involved in building code. So there was a buddy down the hall that was in fine arts and stuff and commercial design. I said, "Oh, that looks like fun." So, anyway, that's one story there. Before I got kicked out of the dorms for throwing fart wads out the windows at people. Anyway, yeah, like when I got trained in art in the '70s, late '70s, everything was done on illustration boards. From the pictures you did with pen and ink, pencil, paints. There was no such thing as computer yet, except in some of the computer labs in the university where you could. All the computer programs are still written. You could play Star Trek on the computer. I remember in fact, it was the guy whose brother bought Squad Leader. He was in computer technology, and we used to go in his computer lab and play this Star Trek game where you'd type in the commands and something like that. But any rate,
Sure.
the art was all done on boards. You'd have to cut ruby lith for windows that would, the picture would show through, but where the ruby lith was, would block out the other part of a photograph. Or type was press type. You'd press it off sheets. You would buy a certain typeface on a 17 by 11 sheet or something, and if you wanted to make a headline type, you would press it out each letter individually and space them, and it was crazy considering today all the computer stuff. So I had to pretty much relearn all this art, you know, when they slowly transferred to computer stuff. Like, you know, and even the first, say, 5 years at Avalon Hill from 81 to, or Monarch Services, and to 85, where they started getting the first Apple computers there, I think, about then. There was just tons. There was a drawers full of all these different press type and borders and everything that you would have to press out, you know, onto your your board to make the artwork of. You'd have layers and layers and layers. Like if I made a map, you would have one hex grid layer, and you'd have to cut one big window for the map art to show through. I would paint the maps on a big board the size of my desk here, and then they would send that to the color separator to make a picture of it. And the problem with that was that the maps were almost too big to fit in the color separator's picture window, and they would get distorted on the edges. So it was tough to fit a hex grid to a distorted map where the edges were all distorted and stuff. But so any rate, the long story is, along about 85, they got these first computers in, and we found out that we could start doing layout of magazines and ads on the computer. And you just really had to learn how to do all this stuff on the computer, the graphic programs. We did, I guess, on the early programs of laying out the magazine, the general and other print things was Quark, or Quark Express, which I used for many years. And it's a lot like what I use now, which is Adobe InDesign, which is for laying out the manuals for all the game magazines are done. And that's like a multi-page format thing. The text flows from one box to the other. And it, you know, so Quark Express is like the current day Adobe Illustrators or Adobe's InDesign program for laying out manuals. Some very wordy player aid cards I might do in InDesign. But yeah, it was an interesting process. Luckily, I will say here one thing. Back in high school, I took a class that I took really just because it had lots of girls in it, or so I heard, typing. So I thought, this is a crypt course. I'm never going to use typing when I get to college. I'm doing architecture at the time and this and that. But because it's like 90% girls in the typing class, maybe I can find a girlfriend in there. But I picked up typing, and it's been like with the best high school class I ever took, just for paying out, because I can type, with all 10 fingers instead of the pick and peck, as I call it. So.
No, that's perfect.
Okay,
I know
go ahead.
You'd mentioned as well that back with the old process, on the rare occasion that maybe you had woods and then the designer said, hey, that's supposed to be a clear hex or something, and you said how hard it was to go back and fix or repair that.
Oh yeah, I mean the perfect example is like Joe Balkowski's games. If you're familiar with the which are now the great campaigns of the Civil War, Stonewall Jackson's Way, the Roads to Gettysburg, and those, the map would start out, Joe would give me this layout which was really detailed, and every hex has villages and buildings in it, and so every hex is either a clear, rolling, woods, mountain, hill. Actually, in those early days, they didn't have the hill terrain yet. So I came up with a nice little thing where the clear terrain was just a very light tan wash. And then if it wanted to be rolling terrain, they had another wash on top of the tan wash, which was a light green wash. And then if it was woods, well, basically everything except clear terrain had a green wash under it, and just the clear had the tan wash, but so the green wash was over everything else. And I would have to mark out on that map looking through a hex grid, picking it up, mark little dots where every hex was, and then I would know. So I would mark out where the clear terrain is, and then everywhere else that the clear wasn't, it would have that green wash over the tan. Because the first thing I would do is do the whole map board would have the tan wood colored wash. And then I'd have to mark out where the green wash was. But the problem with that system was, if I screwed up and got a little happy with the paintbrush and it went into the area that was supposed to be only tan here, it's really hard to get rid of that, because it's a watercolor and it's a light color, and you can't just paint over it with white and then paint over that with a light green, because it doesn't match. And that was the days before you could clone like a Photoshop file. You can clone this green over that or something. And I remember just knocking my head out a few times trying to do that light match it, because once or twice, sure enough, after the board had got so far, like I almost finished it, and then Joe says, "Oh, this is supposed to be a clear terrain, not rolling." Like, no way. It's like, or if also in the same genre, I would do all the roads with a rapidograph pen, and they have numbers like the 000 was the real thin one, which I would do the trails or very small roads with, and then a number 1 or 2 was the thicker pikes. And if I took one of those roads into the wrong hex, believe me, that was not good. Because you cannot get that black ink off the. It's like start over, or Joe, can we please have this road be here? I mean, maybe look at your map and maybe there's a road coming into 1815 from 1814.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were ever like, "Hey, let that hex stay woods just for me, please."
I think there was a few times where I tried to do a few things. I think I was more successful with the roads because some of those were more. He would actually use old county maps that were back from the 1860s and 50s for the roads, and sometimes they're a judgment call. You could find it, but usually if it was a clear terrain, he didn't want rolling or woods in there. So I know a few times I had to get rid of that or try to. I was kind of successful, but it probably took hours of work just to make one hex clear. Now on the computer, every different color is a different layer, and if I mess up something, it's real simple. I can fix it in a second. It's just
beautiful.
You just add more green, or you take it away where you didn't put it.
So I'll do some of these comments here. David Ells says, "Thanks for the chat with Charles, a talented illustrator for so many of his favorite Avalon Hill games." Now, did you stay with Avalon Hill all the way until they finally go out of business, or how do you move through that space?
I was like one of the rats that got off the sinking ship a little before the ship actually put up its last bubbles. I guess back in the early 90s, they had hired a guy named Jim Rose that came in there. I say Jim Rose like this, but he was a nice guy back in the 90s, and he was their computer game producer guy. They had hired him to do computer games. So along about 94, 95, Jim says, he got together with me and McNamara, another artist named Steve Langmead, who I still go hiking with sometimes, and says, we're going to make our own computer company and we're going to make lots of money. And I want you guys to come with me. So I think it was in March or April of 95, I did resign from Avalon Hill and I went with Talonsoft Games. And it was really nice there for a few years. We made definitely more money than Avalon Hill, but that's not saying a lot because, I mean, I was a little bit better than minimum wage there at Avalon Hill by that time, but because I'd worked there for almost 15 years. But yeah, Eric Dott, the owner of Monarch Services and ergo Avalon Hill, wasn't known for lining people's pockets with money except his own and his son's. So so I worked at a computer game company there for about 5 years, from 95 through 2000, where by the end of about 98, 99, Bob McNamara, Jim Rose didn't like Bob at all, it turns out. I don't know. Bob was just too meticulous, too exacting, and Jim was always wanting to get everything done really quick. Just quick. It's not the accuracy, it's how fast we get things out. And Bob was totally anathema to that. Bob wanted the details to be right, and I can tell you all kinds of stories there. But
no, that's perfect. I love that. Keep doing that.
Well, there was a time where Jim came into Bob's office. Bob had an office next to mine, and we had kind of small offices, just one person offices. I could hear Jim over there yelling and screaming, and Jim was actually hitting the walls in between us and sloshing his coffee cup around. And Bob, Bob just yelling at him for stupid reasons, like I guess we were working on Battleground East Front, and Bob was just working on tables for units and this and that, and Jim was over there screaming about who added the Romanians. We didn't want the Romanians in this. It's like, Jim, we talked about this. months ago. We're going to the Romanians and the Hungarians. Oh, we can't do that. Bobby, it's crazy. I mean, we got to get this thing out in a month. So, anyway, so we were fed up. Jim was off his medications, and we all left and went to breakaway games over in Hunt Valley, which was a little bit far further hike from me from here, but it's a 45-minute drive in the morning from. I live off the I-95 corridor northeast of Baltimore, in Harford County.
Okay.
And I guess I have been up here now for 35 years. But so we'd have to then drive over to the northwest part of Baltimore, or north of the Beltway there, in Timonium. So we worked at breakaway games there for about 10 years. And then when the economy really went south in, was it 2009, 2010, there was a big downturn. So I got laid off there. And by that time, Don, of course, had left Avalon Hill, and he was doing his own thing with the Avalon Con. It turned into WBC. So I had heard that I'd been laid off, and called me up and said, would you and Judy, my wife, like to come and help us out at the WBC? You can help run the booth, because Don's always been a good friend and knows I'm a pretty honest guy, so he didn't mind us being money handlers, and it freed Don up to go play Breakout Normandy at times.
Sure.
Of course, Don would still hang out with us in the registration. So that's how Judy and I came to work at the registration at the WBC, and he would pay us some money. And also he said it would be a good thing to, you could talk to some of the game people in the selling games. What if, the game sellers there in the room. And sure enough, I talked to somebody at GMT, and they said, "Oh, we can keep you busy." And so this was about 2009. I was looking to kind of just, do artwork for somebody. Excuse me.
Sure.
And yeah, it's been sweet, because now my commute went from 45 minutes over to Hunt Valley to about 45 seconds upstairs and downstairs. And
so you just work purely from home for GMT then, and anybody else, right?
Yeah, anybody else. GMT it started out at GMT where I was pricing out every job, every counter sheet I did for him, and then Tony Curtis at GMT kind of got tired of doing like 100 invoices every few months or something. He said, we can pay you, X number of dollars per month if you want to just give us top priority. And I talked about it with Judy. If I want to do this it's kind of tying myself to GMT more. But
Sure.
Oops, my thing just went black because I guess it hadn't been touched. I thought maybe we lost connection.
You're good. Nope, still.
Yeah, no, it's just black on this end. But anyway, yeah, I got kind of a job with GMT for me to give them priority, but I still do a lot of other work for a lot of other good people. Mike Ranella of Revolution Games that you had on, and he told you about me, I guess, a little bit, and Kevin Zucker of Operational Studies Group, or OSG, on Napoleonics. I'm working on a map for him now for his next game campaign, or Napoleon in Spain. And of course, MMP boys, which I've known back from the playtest days at Avalon Hill, Perry Cock and Brian Yaus, that used to come there every week. We play squad leader and stuff at the playtest Yanks and all those fun games up in the upper part of Reed Street. Craig Taylor would even be up there sometimes throwing dice out the window when the Empire and Arms game went south for him. Oh, that was a fun time. We were over there playing some big squad leaders, testing something, and in our playtest group on the third floor in Reed Street, and then Rex Martin and Bob's there, and probably Brian and Perry Cock and a few other guy named Tom Murphy, old Murph, and but then at the same time they were testing Empires in Arms, and I think they had bought it from another company. And I'll never forget, Craig Taylor was a great guy. I loved him. He was funny, but if something didn't go right for him, sometimes he got a little hot under the collar, and he started hollering and screaming and got his dice and just threw them out the window down 3 flights of onto some car probably going by on Reed Street. He was hollering and screaming, but
so he's mid-game and he just chucks his dice.
Yeah, he says these dice aren't any good. I don't know if he had to open the window up. He might have had to go open the window up and just throw them out.
Well, that leads right into, like, at least I'll say every gamer's dream. But so you had all these guys and gals that love games, but you guys are able to come together and you're play testing all these different games and taking a break from the project you're working on and getting in a lot of gameplay all at the same time.
Yeah, that was a great thing about my position there. I mean, I was paid hourly as an artist, and it wasn't much. I mean, minimum wage plus a quarter a year get added or something.
Hmm.
But I could go down to Reed Street and play test and be on the clock. And so I would get good overtime doing that. And time and a half overtime was really good. So but every week, and of course I didn't mind play testing, getting paid for it.
You
That was
bet.
great. Yeah.
It's like a dream.
So I had 10 hours of overtime a week or something, depending, 5, 6, 8, 10, because we go out there Wednesday, and it was also a time to touch base with all the different projects, with like Craig Taylor on Patton, and Mick Yule with this game and that game, and Rex to work on the general. By that time, I guess Dale Schaefer had left, at least a little, and that was the artist that was kind of a dedicated artist for them at Avalon Hill. He left after a little bit after I was there, maybe 4 or 5 years. So I had pretty much gone from the like extra commercial artist for helping in the art department to doing all the maps and stuff for Avalon Hill.
So when he left, you kind of took over as the main map person?
It was a gradual thing, where Dale moved on. Dale liked to ride motorcycles and smoke a lot of pot, and I think
possibly, who knows?
Possibly. Nobody knows where Dale is anymore. At least I don't. I'd like to see him again. He was a fun guy. I don't really remember how long he was there. He might have been there 10 years after I was there, but I'm pretty sure at least by 95 when I left, that Dale had been gone a few years. So I was just doing, I was doing pretty much all the artwork. Well, actually, they had hired Mark Simonich shortly before I left. Mark came on to work at Avalon Hill. They didn't know I was leaving then at the time Mark came on, but Mark and I actually just overlapped about 3 months or something there at Avalon Hill.
Now, how many folks? So, did you say all the play testing was done on Wednesday specifically, or was it like every evening?
For ASL, it was one night a week. Wednesday comes to mind, but it might have been Thursday or Tuesday. I'm not sure now what night it was. I mean, that was 15 or more years ago.
And I love this though. So you guys are in playing and testing, and are you literally just trying to also, hey, how can we break this, or is there something we can exploit?
Yeah.
Oh,
my buddy Murphy was a great rules breaker. we needed a rules broken. We let Murphy, because he liked to jack it, and he liked to always win the game, and he would jack the rules, whatever he could do. Well, it doesn't say I can't do this here, so Murphy now lives out in Columbus, Ohio, I think. He hadn't played test. He probably hadn't played squad leader in many years, but he was very good at finding little holes in rules. And we'd play test scenarios that were, like Rex was going to print in the general, or we were going to be in the game released. So it was a lot of play testing of the different things. Sometimes we would have a few different scenarios being play tested. I mean, I remember play testing a lot of different things up there, including the old Red Barricades game. That has an interesting story to it, because I think I got a map from that, because I had written to, when Don was working on the Turning Point Stalingrad game, which is, I like doing the map for that. I wrote to somebody in the West German at that time, the Bundesarchiv, and they sent me all kinds of good stuff. And one thing was this overhead view of Stalingrad, a map. I don't know the scale. I've still got it rolled up here, and you can see all the factories. Each factory building was in there, and I said, "Oh, this would be cool to put the tractor factory or the Red Barricades factory on a map." And I didn't really tell anybody about it, but on my spare time there, and every day that I have spare time sitting around the art table, I got a projector and blew up the Red Barricades map and fit it to a hex grid, and then just kind of traced out where the buildings would be, and then it got to be more and more detailed, kind of a passion. It was fun. And yeah, it was for that project that I had written to the Bundesarchiv in West Germany. And some guy from the Bundeswehr sent me all kinds of great maps. And overhead photos. It was really cool to get that. It was like Christmas in July or whenever, when I got these photographs that were black and white, but they were the whole city and stuff. But to get back to the little red barricade story, so I decided to just take the one part of that map and blow it up and try to get it to squad leader scale, 40 meters per hex. And Don came in there, just kind of wandered in as he does sometime, because Don wasn't normally in the art department where I work. And he says, "This is what I've always wanted squad leader to be, like some of this historical map actually on a hex grid, because before Red Barricades, they never had any real maps put on there. All the things were the geomorphic kind of fantasy. Fantasy's not the right word, but just they're not real terrain. And
Right.
maybe some people got some ideas from real terrain for those maps, but they were just maps that, here's a village, here's open ground, here's a city thing, and they would draw them to fit a hex grid. So the Red Barricades map, was trying to get all the buildings to actually fit a hex grid, where all the roads are. It was all based on a real map, and then done to scale. And Don saw that and said, this would be really, really good. That's what I've always wanted to do with squad leader. And I said, oh, really? So that's kind of the start of it becoming a real game.
Well, speaking of like beautiful maps and them being real, so Saint Nazaire, here's just one portion of it. I mean,
Right.
This is gorgeous. How long, if you even remember, maybe you don't remember time, but I mean, this had to be a major project.
Well, yeah, that was probably a major project. I don't know how long. I'm guessing 20 hours maybe. I actually kept track of time for everything, how long I would spend on this map and that map. So yeah, and of course Saint Nazaire has 3 of those panels. So
Yes.
it's like 33 inches long by 16, 33 by 16 map or something.
And this is, of course, all pre-computer. At this point, you're still hand doing all this, right?
That's all hand done.
Yeah.
All those little rings on there, and the squares were all press squares and press rings, I think. And then the lines were drawn with pens. And then we would tell the camera department, well, I want this line to actually knock out white, or this line prints red. Would have to tell them what color everything was. So the smart thing to do is to put everything that you wanted different colors on different overlays. But sometimes that would get crazy number of overlays. So you would also have a covering on all these maps that would have tracings, and I would go over the red pens. This line's red, this text is red, this text is blue. You'd have to tell them what to do, and then you give them the combinations of each color, for 4-color process.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful work, Charlie.
I always liked that Saint Nazaire too, and I like the Turning Point Stalingrad. Actually, the Turning Point Stalingrad map probably was, at least before anything I worked on recently, that probably took more time than anything. All the little crazy buildings, and almost all of that was done from that map that I received from the Bundesarchiv, that had the whole Stalingrad on it and everything. And we just adapted that map and then marked the area boundaries on it, and then use the overhead photos to see where some terrain was out in the expanse outside Stalingrad.
Beautiful. Now I've got to ask you while you're here. I loved the General. I mean, I think I subscribed. I was young when I started playing. 83. My first board game was B-17, Queen of the Skies.
Oh, that's a fun game.
Oh yeah, it was just I loved the Air War, and the bomber was my favorite. And I saw it, and that was my first game ever.
I actually had a bomber get shot down on its 25th mission. I couldn't believe it. I had caught this bomber. Of course, all the crew, I think, had been replaced at least once, but the plane hadn't been shot down. But it was his 25th mission, and God darn it, if it didn't get I don't know, it was a fatal airburst in the plane or something. It was classic.
Oh yes, the bips, the burst in plane was brutal. I'm doing like a live playthrough, right? Not a live playthrough, but with my Patreon supporters. I thought what would be fun, and I threw them on as crew of the plane and just started flying missions. Because playing the game, you get attached to these characters that at the time I was grabbing kids from school. First, of course, it's my buddies, but then pretty soon I'm just needing names because I'm having to churn out replacements.
Mhm.
And I hadn't played it in years. I think I'd tried to run my son through a game to see if he was interested. And I started doing it with the Patreon supporters. And that game tells such great narrative stories. I mean, it's just amazing. But before I get lost on B-17, which a lot of my watchers know that's one of my favorites or my favorite. The General, I subscribed, I think, in probably 84, 85. And I think one of the reasons I even subscribed was because of the B-17 Queen of the Skies issue, where all the articles and the way it was featured. What kind of work? I mean, what were you doing, layouts, or what were you doing with the General covers? I know a lot of the covers.
I can't say for that particular issue, but
Sure.
just in general, once I started doing more of the game stuff there, I wasn't doing the layout. The layout was actually done at Reed Street by Dale Schaefer and Rex. Rex Martin was the editor at the time, and most of the time while I was there, Rob Waters came on later. But so I would do the ASL scenario, the art for each scenario would have a historical picture. I would always do those. And I would do header art for the articles. A lot of the articles I would do header art. Sometimes it'd be cartoons. Sometimes it was even a remake of a drawing I did back in college once or twice. I think we might have used an old art of mine. I always liked this one I did of a tiger tank with a hex grid superimposed on it. I've got it somewhere in this room. I don't even know where, but it kind of looked cool, and it was just a all pencil on paper drawing with the side of a tiger tank and then a hex grid for it was a for the Third Reich game.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in this room on a shelf. There's so much crap in here nowadays. I need more bookshelves. I got stacks of games over here. But
I love it. Keep talking. That's like pretty talk.
Yeah, for the General, I would do these header articles sometimes. I usually wouldn't do the cover. Okay. I don't know if I ever did a General cover because those were usually just by game. They were the game box covers. That was the cheap way to do it. The featured game. So it was just kind of the header art for the articles. Sometimes Rex would feed me 2 or 3, and he would need them, next month. And those were also done the old-fashioned ways generally because there was before I did any artwork on the computer. It was done on a little board, and I would do a pen and ink sketch typically, and then cut ruby lift for what color is what, and and tell the camera department to do certain ways, and use press type and. Go ahead.
You may not know, but was the General, so since it had that subscription model, was it a decent moneymaker for Avalon Hill? I mean, because it was the continual, you don't know?
I don't know anything about the financials, so I really don't. And I'm not a numbers guy. That's why I had to get out of architecture, because numbers and stuff, I can barely balance a checkbook, but I do like that as a puzzle sometimes.
Sure. No, I loved it as a kid, and I lived up in the mountains of Colorado, and I played a lot of solitaire games, so I loved everything. I mean, I never did any of the play by email, but I loved the way it was the early way I felt that it was linking those board gamers together. Of course, Avalon Con, I always wanted to go to Avalon Con as a kid. Didn't happen, but it was such a neat way to tie the gamers together. And, you would vote on your favorite game, and every month they would have the little, what games were kind of voted the highest and stuff. And so I loved it. I mean, after I fell out in the 90s, I wasn't gaming as much. And so what I ended up, I let my subscription lapse, but as I came back into gaming in the 2007s, I even got on eBay and started trying to pick up as many both back issues before I started in 84, 85, and then, trying to get up to when they started to really it got more slicked magazine style right before everything ended. So, but
yeah, it's probably after I left in 95.
Let me look at a couple comments here. We'll see. Let's see. We got Trevor. Trevor's on a lot. Hey, the amazing Charlie Kibler. So there's Trevor.
Hi, Trevor.
We got again combat board games. I was always wondering why the old blue for Op4 counters, why the red Op4 was pink more than red. Was it a fading issue or a printing thing, or was it intentional?
Well, first of all, I'm not to blame for that. I mean, those light blue and ugly light pink colors as backgrounds were really, they came about in the 60s. It was probably, I'm just guessing, just because they might have had it printed on a 3-color press for
Okay,
cheapness. So black, pink, and blue, maybe.
got it.
I mean, I don't even know what, but yeah, that was some pretty ugly stuff. That was, and it might have been, if it was for that reason, because they could just put 3 colors on the press and it saves some money. They don't have to wash a 4th roller for a 4-color process. It might have been like a PMS color pink, Pantone matching systems PMS. So whereas 4-color process, you can make just all kinds of colors by you tell them different percentages of the colors. And but yeah, I don't know the real answer to that, but it really came to be back in the 60s or maybe 50s. Really, I mean, Tactics 2 had that probably, or Tactics 1 even. I'm not sure. I don't have those games, but yeah, you had some of your early classic games that had the pink and light blue counter backgrounds. We don't do that too much anymore.
All right, let's see. We've got another one. Let me bring up Andrew Cook. Andrew Cook says, "Hey Charlie, what do you consider your best and/or favorite map?"
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is Turning Point Stalingrad. I always liked that one. I think that came out nice looking. It's functional. The art is nice. It's freaking detailed as heck. I
It
mean,
is.
it's not as well. I guess I just like it because it didn't, the art doesn't overwhelm the map. You can play on it, yet you can sit there and look at it too. If you get tired of waiting for uh your opponent to move or something, you can study the map. But there's a lot of other maps. I always like the raid on Saint Nazaire. I like doing that map, and it was kind of a fun one to do because you're in much closer, even obviously than Turning Point Stalingrad, and we had great pictures to work from. But I'm not sure where those even came from now. But I guess somebody must have had those aerial photographs because I mean I didn't make that stuff up. I made up the colors because I'm sure everything was black and white. But that was a nice map. I like the great campaigns of the Civil War maps that I used to do for Joe Balkowski. People seem to like those.
Yeah.
After I left Avalon Hill, a couple of the maps were done by some other guys, which they didn't turn out so well, and we're kind of redoing those now one at a time. MMP is. I'm just recently redoing. I'm getting visited by one of the cats here. Hopefully, he doesn't turn the computer over.
There you go. Everybody loves cats.
Well, some
Most
people like.
everybody. Most everybody. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. There'll be a non-cat person going, "I don't. I'm allergic."
And I like the Red Barricades map. I always liked this Eastern Front warfare of the World War II as being the real war. I mean,
Oh,
that's where Germany and Russia were just. I mean, there was a no holds barred fight
death walk.
for
Yeah.
their. At the time, each nation, obviously, Russia was fighting for their life against Nazi Germany, and for Hitler and his cohorts. I mean, that was their Lebensraum. They had to have that and kill all the Russians in the meantime. And they did so many crazy things there in Russia. The Germans did. It's just in retrospect, it's good that they did because it really got the Russians' blood up to fight them and get their the first the Great Patriotic War and kick Hitler's ass back into Germany and the Great Beyond. But yeah, I mean that was where the real war was being fought. I mean it's just
100%.
so, and then Stalingrad just personifies the whole Eastern Front in a nutshell, I
Yep.
guess. I don't know why, but I was just a student of Stalingrad, and so when we got those maps from the Bundesarchive again, and I thought I could maybe put a hex grid over the factory area. It was like, oh, this is fun,
Oh, yeah.
This factory building. I mean, by that time I'd played several of the ASL scenarios that were supposedly the tractor factory, and this takes place behind the Red Barricades. This scenario, and like, oh no, that factory building is like 8 hexes tall and 5 hexes wide. It's not 4 hexes by 3 hexes. That's a tiny factory. Yeah, these things are big. It was interesting. Yeah, that's kind of what I was wanting to see, was just how big these buildings really were, to when you actually put them up there to scale. So I wasn't
Yeah,
really thinking of making a real war game map out of it, but it just kind of snowballed. And then, like I say, Don Greenwood came in there and said this is what he always had envisioned, uh, squad leader being, or ASL being.
beautiful. Here's Jeffrey. Jeffrey says Quirk Press, if I'm saying it right.
Quark
That
Express.
Quark
That
Express.
brings back memories. Okay, so Jeff must know about Quark Express. I had mentioned that earlier. That was the Apple software that was used to lay out the general for many a year, and now, at least, instead of, I think it's still around. I'm not even sure, but the Adobe InDesign, it also is a multi-page layout kind of thing that I do the manuals in for GMT and so on. Yeah, Quark
Beautiful.
Express. It was a good program.
We've got a great comment from Andrew Cook. When I was stationed at Fort Meade in Maryland in the 90s, we'd go to the Avalon Hill warehouse to buy direct. I wish I had some pictures.
Hmm.
So it looks like I never even thought about that, but obviously customers could come in and just buy straight out and avoid
Yeah.
shipping
Now,
and everything else.
I heard there was actually, where they stored the games was on Quad Avenue in Baltimore. I don't know if that's where he went. That was
Hmm.
really the warehouse where they put together and stored the games to ship out. Reed Street really didn't have games to sell, and they didn't sell them out of Monarch Services on Harford Road where I worked. So I'm interested. He might have gone to Quad Avenue. I never went to Quad Avenue. I just heard about it. That was the warehouse. So maybe they sold games from there.
Hmm.
Later on there was some game store that one of somebody's friend or Eric's niece opened outside the Beltway. Like they had bought a house and then turned it into a game store to sell. But that's probably not what he's talking about.
We'll see. I'll work down through the questions. We'll see if he gets it in. So, Trevor Just, hey, Charlie, I'm in my 30s and have two sons who both enjoy war games with me. First of all, that's awesome. How do you feel the war game hobby is doing with the younger crowd?
I'm not the best person to really ask that. Uh, that guy might know better than me. It sounds pretty good. I mean, you always got to get young blood in here. Neither one of my daughters picked it up, and I got them to play wrestling back in the day when I worked at Avalon Hill, and the wrestling game
Sure.
came out. I love that game. It was fun, and I actually, one of my daughters won the award one year at the battle royale because nobody would attack this poor little 8-year-old girl in the battle royale. So she ended up taking wood in that, and back in the when Avalon Con, when it was Avalon Con actually, at Hunt Valley and stuff. But
That's awesome.
I don't know. To get back to the question, yeah, you need to get young people in it, and I don't know, recruit your sons.
Yeah, he's got them
Most
there.
young people play computer games. They're going to want to go play, you know, all the computer war games, the computer fantasy games, the computer games where you kill people and steal their cars. What Grand Theft Auto or whatever. I've never played that, and I guess you
Right.
can do a lot of things in that game. I don't know. Uh,
So I hear. I haven't played that either.
so I hear too. But yeah, I mean that's a better question for people like Ken Guttermuth that's now running the WBC or something. There's a lot of young people that come to that convention, and sometimes they actually play the games, and sometimes when they play the games, they beat the older people. Uh,
Perfect.
but
Let's see, Mr. 262. Will we ever see, and I know this isn't your realm, but will we ever see a reprint of Saint Nazaire in our
really,
lifetimes?
I was actually wondering if it had ever been reprinted. So I guess it's not, huh? I don't even know, because sometimes when people reprint games, I don't know, because I don't own the rights to the maps
Sure.
I did at Avalon Hill. I don't even know. I was contacted when they reprinted Breakout Normandy because Don wanted me to paint the map for Art Lupinacci, and when they released it through L2 Design Group. But I don't know. It should be. Boy, that would make it really good. Mainly the counters could be improved, because I always hated those tiny little boat counters, and the counters in that game really sucked for being so small and tiny.
Hmm.
And we just kind of recycled some of the ASL art for the figures. But boy, that could be done nicely, and that could be a nice computer game too. I mean, it's a solitaire game, so
Sure.
all solitaire games lead to good computer games. games, if you ask me, or at least for like a vassal type computer game. I don't know. That's a good question. Somebody ought to redo that.
Let's see here. What do we have?
Too bad I don't have the original art for that game anymore. All that
I was
stuff got
wondering.
thrown away. I like the maps of the stuff that I'm pretty sure almost all of them got thrown away when they closed in the late 90s.
I would have been dumpster diving if I was over there.
Oh, Brian, this is my nephew, I guess.
Brian Reynolds.
Yeah.
Is that what he looks like? Does he have that little beard?
I do have that Bundeswehr map. It's rolled up here. Yeah, he has a beard now, more than likely.
Very cool. Well, let's
My
see.
sister's son.
Vorpal Bite also put on here. I know John Hill. He is a character.
So I met John Hill once, but I don't really know him well.
I just like this because it's hello from Magnus in Sweden.
Oh, hello, Magnus.
That is what I love about
Sweden.
Yes, you get these worldwide. I wonder what time it is there. Let's see. Some people saying hi to Magnus, probably. Let's see the strategic review. Come on. I'm looking. Oh, well, I like Trevor here. Trevor also feels that he should be wearing a glorious hat. You should, Trevor, just while we're on.
I could put a new one on about this time, maybe.
There you go. Swap it out. I'm going to have to refresh my whiskey in a second here, too.
Mine's kind of watered down. I'm going to have to go neat here soon.
No problem with that at all. Let's see. Trevor also says, what did he say? I jumped on me while I was looking. Only accessible cats. I don't know. Wood burning cats. I don't know what that is with a wink. Let's see. Here's Vorpal with I think the younger crowd likes the Warhammer and Star Wars games. That's true. You know, there's been that topic of the graying of our hobby, the war game hobby. I know what drew me in was I love history. In particular, I loved World War II history. I was reading everything I could on it. And the second I found a board game store, I was like, oh my goodness, I can get in and play the history. What a new way to to learn it as I went. So I wonder, as the youth, maybe, you know, there's got to be folks that are still loving history to that level. Let's see. What is the least? Okay, here we go. That's a good question. It's kind of the inverse from Zaitsev. What's the least favorite map you did? And can you tell us more about breakaway games and how and why they screwed up Sid Meier's Antietam so badly? Wow, it's like a three-parter. So what's your favorite or the least favorite?
Least favorite.
That's calling you to be a critic of your own. But I guess least favorite could be the biggest pain to work on too.
Oh, well, usually the ones that are a big pain usually are worth it. But, you know, you're putting in a lot of pain, like Turning Point Stalingrad was a pain to do. Gosh, I'm not sure, but there's probably been some not that great looking maps. I did not like doing the firepower maps for Avalon Hill. Craig Taylor he wanted these things to be kind of generic. And he was just too much into wanting this and that, and I did not like doing that stuff. But I made it like he liked it. He thought they looked great, but I thought they looked like cow poop. And I still wouldn't. I think that is right up there with some of the least favorite maps I ever did. And they were generic maps like the squad leader. They'd fit together, you know. And he could say in one scenario, this blotchy brown terrain represents mud. Or now in this next scenario, it represents mountains. Or this green represents, you know, marsh. In the next scenario, it might represent tall trees. So you wanted generic looking blotches or something like that. That I just never liked that much. So there's one. That's probably right up there with being some of the ones I didn't like. I didn't like the whole way he was doing it. You know, doing generic terrain that, you know, could be interpreted different ways. So I tried to do it, you know, somewhat that it wasn't obviously, you can't make it obvious that way. You know, you can't make it obviously trees because, like I say, one scenario he wanted to find is something, other than next scenario something else. But
That's
And
interesting.
tell us more about breakaway games and how and why they screwed up Sid Meier's Antietam. Well, I don't know how or why they screwed it up, if it was program wise or what. I don't do any programming, and I didn't really do much on that. I don't think I didn't. I don't even know what breakaway games did with Sid Meier's Antietam. I remember one of the best computer games I worked on and liked was the Battleground Antietam game I did for Talonsoft, because I got to go visit the battlefield, and I
Really?
loved the battlefield of Antietam. That's my shirt, in fact. It's a great battlefield. I mean, Gettysburg Battlefield has a monument every 15 yards, and you really can't take a picture without getting a monument in it, which is okay sometimes. Sometimes you want the expanse of the battlefield as the soldiers saw it. You know,
Sure.
Antietam is a great battlefield. It's a small battlefield compared to a lot of things like Chickamauga, Gettysburg, and stuff. And it's well kept. It doesn't have monuments every 15 yards. There's some good monuments there, but it's, you got the Dunker Church there. You can see the Miller's cornfield, and we got to do all these scenarios about Antietam, and actually we did South Mountain too. I had another guy design all the South Mountain scenarios for that. So, but that's totally off the point of this. So I can't really answer that other question. I don't even know what they screwed up about Sid Meier's Antietam. We would get some games from that thing that we were to develop scenarios for. That thing being like Sid Meier's. Brian Reynolds, my nephew, worked for Sid Meier's, I think, at the time, or maybe by that time he'd gone on to form big, huge games and stuff. But yeah, there's Brian. You have
Yeah,
any
he says,
favorite books on Stalingrad? Oh yeah, I got some good books on Stalingrad. Brian, if you want some stuff on Stalingrad, this is the place to get them. Give me a ring. uh, probably my favorite book at Stalingrad. I don't know. I mean, Enemy at the Gates is a great book. Uh, but there's some other good books too. I guess that's one of the best purely Stalingrad books. That's a classic. I got a lot of archival photos of Stalingrad, high res pictures of all the factories, even some of the southern Stalingrad. I don't know if he's fishing for doing a Stalingrad game or something,
I
but
like it.
I got a ton of stuff here on Stalingrad.
You're so right about Stalingrad being like the microcosm of the war in the East in total.
Yeah, it was just like the whole thing packaged into one big deal. I mean, that was just your no holds barred, everybody knock them over the head kind of place, and
Yeah.
it's
And then
interesting.
the whole shift too, how they're barely holding on to small little sections, and then boom, all of a sudden they're in. Yeah, Zaitsev just wanted to say your artwork is really great. Of course, he says except for firepower, because you added that in there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Trevor's got a great question here, and then we are kind of getting over our hour. It's flown by, but getting close to an hour.
I
So
have to say
Charlie,
something too. I wanted to, but let's do this
oh,
first.
we'll get you in. We'll take you as long as
What
you've
maps are
got
you
some.
working on now? I don't know if I should be saying that, but I'm working on the next maps for Kevin Zucker's Napoleon in Spain. I've always got stuff going for MMP between ASL and I've kind of finished up maps for their repackaging of Grant
Great
Takes
job.
Command with On to Richmond all in one box. So those are going to be 4 big maps. They all overlap each other, and that's always a pain in the patoodle to do, to get all the overlaps precise and exact, because I'm a stickler for being everything exact as I can. But one thing I wanted to mention, because something that caught me in the Mike Ranella interview you did, was that Mike said he bought his first war game at the Complete Strategist in Manhattan, and I did too.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't live anywhere near New York, but the first time I visited New York was back in the late '70s. I was still going to college at UT, go Vols, and a buddy of, there was an art, like, if you were an art student, you got invited to go on a bus up to New York and visit the art museums, and me and my buddy was in forestry, but anybody could go because they needed to fill out the bus, I guess. So he and I went, and we went to our museums, the Modern Museum of Art and the Guggenheim, and it was really cool seeing all those paintings by all the great artists and stuff. But then we went down to Chinatown, and along the way, somewhere we came to the Complete Strategist on wherever that was located. Just chanced across it. And I looked in the window, said these war games. Like,
Beautiful.
holy shit! Look at all these great war games. I can't believe it. You know, by that time, my idea was a war game was Risk, and that's all I played with Brian's mom and my sister and brother. We'd play Risk for till 3 or 4 in the morning, and that was great war gaming. Play up in Canada sometimes on an island in the kitchen table. But anyway, to get back to the Complete Strategist, I bought a game called Fold a Gap by SPI.
Sure.
And that was my first real war game if you don't count Risk. You know, Risk is a great game, but it's not really a war game. Of course, Fold a Gap had chemical warfares and nuclear bombs, tank divisions and corps, and it was the whole thing about the Russians attacking through Fulda Gap in Germany, which was kind of cool. And I took it back to my buddies at UT and got out, you know, called over my Risk buddies, and we got this game out and started playing it. And yeah, it was kind of fun. We played it a few times and learned the rules. And
Beautiful.
I still have the pieces for it somewhere, but I don't know. I think I've got it stashed away on the shelf now, that Fulda Gap game. But I haven't played it in a long time. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't ask you beforehand, but is it okay if I bring up the GoFundMe page? Are you okay with that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Charlie had fallen down and you actually broke. Yeah. You broke your arm.
Broke my wrist here, both bones of my wrist, and dislocated my elbow to where it looked really weird, where the bones, I guess, were pushed out the elbow. And now it looks back to normal, of course. And that was back in mid-March, right when all this COVID virus stuff was starting. It seemed like about March 19th. I can almost bend my fingers to normal, but, you know, not quite. It's like, you know,
Right.
Can't really bend them backwards anymore. And, you know, that's as far as my hand goes forward, as opposed to, you know, you can see how it's still stiff, but luckily I'm right-handed. So I didn't really lose a lot of work. I mean, I lost some work and I had to slow down there all through March and early April. I just couldn't do too much in a cast, which I had on my left arm for about 4 weeks.
Sure.
And that was not a lot of fun.
Sure. So,
but the good part was I got to watch my wife mow the grass for the first time.
Yeah, I saw your photo of that.
Okay, go ahead.
So we learned from Mike Ranella, that
Yes.
you were trimming up a tree and it got hung up and you tried to clear it, and then that's when the fall happened. And as we know, medical bills, especially when you're having that kind of surgery and whatnot. Hey, there's a cat. Who's this?
This is Tatiana.
Tatiana.
She's our youngest cat, about 3 years old or 2.5, somewhere in there. Tot.
So your medical bills went pretty high, and if anybody wants to help out with that, you have the GoFundMe page, and then they can just search GoFundMe and then Charles Kibler, and I'll end up. I once I'm done here, I can go into the description and I can put it down there as well. And if anybody wants to help, they can go in there and just
appreciate every penny. It would be appreciated. I've had a lot of generous people donate some money up there. It's just crazy. I mean, some are total strangers, but there's a whole lot of, war gamers and stuff that have been very generous. So, I mean, what can I say? It's been great. So I'm not worried as much these days about the bills as I was at first. That was crazy. I mean, because the thing was, if you want me to go into some of the whole hospital thing, which I think is on the GoFundMe page, but briefly, we first went to a one of those 24-hour care things, and I wasn't even sure if my arm was broken at the time, but I knew my elbow was messed up because it would just look crazy. And they looked at it, they took x-rays, and they said, no, you need to go to the emergency room. So we went about 4 miles down the street to Upper Chesapeake Hospital, and we got there, and they took x-rays, and they confirmed, well, they had to take more x-rays because they couldn't read the x-rays that I'd gotten from the other place, and they put on a disc, of course, so they had to do more x-rays. And then so that emergency room says, no, because you got a broken wrist and your elbow's dislocated, you need to see a specialist. So they had to call around several hospitals up in Christiana, Delaware, and Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and then University of Maryland in Baltimore Trauma Center. The latter place finally took me. They had an extra room they could put me into. I got an ambulance ride from Hartford County on into Baltimore, and because they had to do it in an ambulance. They said I couldn't just have my wife take me.
See, I know.
So,
no, and you're in pain.
And I spent the next like 20 hours at the University of Maryland Trauma Center, and they were great doctors there. They took good care of me. I liked them a lot, and they fixed everything up, and it's still healing. But so then I get a $28,000 bill, and that's just for one aspect of it. It's just the University of Maryland medical expenses. The room, the board, the drugs, this and that, and the doctors are another $6,666. That's
too many
the surgeon
sixes.
bill.
666. Gosh.
Yeah, 6666. Extra devilish.
Well, and then I know you're doing rehab to try to get all the motion back and everything as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Rehab twice a week. Well, it had been twice a week. This next week I graduate to once a week rehab on Tuesdays.
Nice. Well, that was definitely one thing when I talked to Mike, and then I asked if Mike would reach out to you and share maybe the fact that I wanted to talk to you. Not only to have you on the show, I wanted to have you on the show just because your map work and your history back to Avalon Hill just fascinates me. But when he told me you'd been injured as well, I thought, you know what? Board gamers, war gamers in particular, love to give back, especially after all the years and the enjoyment from everything from your art you got here in St. Nazaire. So I definitely wanted to bring that up as long as you were willing. So again, I'll put that in the description, but you can literally search just GoFundMe Charles Kibler, Kibler, and you can find it that way as well. So anybody that wants to, as much or as little, it's all helpful.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, every $10 helps a lot. I mean, I had guys up there apologizing for only giving $10, but it's like, man, that's fine.
Sure.
It's great,
Yeah, it all helps. It's that whole group thing, which is actually what I like. I mean, so I was at WBC. I went once. My buddy Greg Schmicken goes there all the time. And
I know Greg.
Oh, Greg's awesome. He's always handing out buttons, and he's always got some jerky.
Yep, he does, exactly.
He does. And
so when you went to WBC, did you play in the B-17 tournament?
I did. Gosh, did I love that. We did the 3 flights. We had the meeting the night before. You get the after-action report where they turn the mug. There's a flight tomorrow, or now we can drink. And man, they had the little I forget. It's like the gift giveaway where everybody brings a book or something and puts it on the table, and you can
I don't even know about those details because I have to work the registration booth. I can't play in those tournaments. That was an early tournament when we're always busy in the reg room.
Yeah, it took a lot. It took a full day, but boy, did I love it. I've got the missions that we flew, and of course you're working with somebody, and just meeting. I think we had like 55 folks in there all playing. And I mean, it was so fun to play this solitaire game that I'd played for years, and then to play it with a group.
Yeah. Giant flight of planes. Everybody gets assigned their different flights and stuff. It's like a real, 100 planes or 55 planes flying.
Oh, it was great. And, the thing I've always liked is I've always had great experiences with fellow war gamers. The only bad experience I had at WBC was I sat down at a table to play a Euro game, Puerto Rico, and I didn't, I'd only played it a few times, and it turned out a guy at the table wanted to beat a guy that had won wood at Puerto Rico the year before, and I did an unoptimal move, and my goodness, you'd think I'd called his wife a bad name or something. I mean,
he got all pissed.
Yeah, I was like, calm down, dude. I don't know what I'm doing. And the guy that had won the year before actually real quick does some calculations and said, well, I was going to win with 13 points because of his move. I'm going to win with 24. And that's the only thing that chilled the guy out. And I'm like, man, I need to go play with some war gamers who are actually nice. This guy was just losing his mind over a game of Puerto Rico. But enough said on that.
Yeah,
So,
you probably get that at just about every tournament, or there's certainly the chance of it. Somebody just gets too involved and it's too serious. I mean, it's a game, for God's sake, Have
right.
fun. That's what it's
Yeah,
for. It's entertainment. It's not like a life and death situation.
right. That's where I'm always at. I get enough stress from my day job. So when I go into the board game world, I'm looking for, I want tension. I love good game tension. I love losing even when it's so close and I lose. I'm like, oh, that was phenomenal. But so it's not even the winning or losing I care about. I just want a nice, fun, tight game. All right, we're actually at an hour 15. We're rolling great. Anything else you want to talk about? I haven't asked. No, this has been great conversation, Charlie.
Well, thank you. I haven't made too much of a fool of myself.
Not
But
at all.
no,
You're awesome.
I don't know. I mean, I guess we're pretty much done. Are any more questions that we haven't answered that are important? Maybe throw it out to the public there or something. And
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I think we covered things. I like I say, I had wanted to mention that I had also got my first game at the Complete Strategist. When I saw that Mike Brunella said that, I said, "Holy cow, that's interesting." Now there's something.
well,
Show
that's just a
Chief.
great
Thanks for
show.
hosting.
They like having you on. I've wanted to have you. I've been thinking about, because I'll slowly reach out to different designers. I've had another artist on, Steve Pichal, that does a lot of the cover art for Academy Games. And I've been thinking about reaching out to you. And when I had Mike on, I knew that Mike likes to, or maybe only exclusively use you as his artist. And so when that came up, I was just like, and then I was able to reach out and chat with you and your history. I would love to have you on again if you ever want to be back on. I love you. You don't understand. I love hearing these Avalon Hill stories. I mean, I could just let you talk Avalon Hill, and I would just sit back and enjoy you talking about it. Quite
Well,
honestly.
yeah, I mean, you ought to get hooked up with some of the other Avalon Hill guys, Rex Martin or Robert Waters. I could give you Robert Waters' email or something. You could, I mean, he was just over here a couple days ago. He picked up a game to help support me. I, sold him a game I got that had never been opened. But
Awesome. Well, please do.
there's
If you don't mind, reach out to some of those guys, and if they're interested, and they want to come on, please send me their contact information. I'll reach out and talk to them.
I've got
And
Bob McNamara's email too. I mean, Bob's an old war gamer from way back, Avalon Hill alumni or alumnus, I guess you say.
love it.
Yeah, we can discuss that.
I think that would be great. Yeah, please reach out. And I just want to, as a kid, I had all these, like, I'd see the address and go, man, these guys got the dream job. So you, sir, had the dream job. I love, as soon as you said you were getting paid overtime to play test, I was like,
I love that.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
I remember the other when I first started working at Avalon Hill, there was also another girl there working. She was probably a few years older than I was, at the time, and she was pretty jealous that I was getting paid overtime to go play test games, and she was only getting the art time that, on the job 8 hours a day or stuff, but I, they would pay me to go do that, though. I mean, I didn't crow to her about it, but I think she, you always find out eventually that, other people are getting money. She probably asked me or something, like, or found out I was play testing there and getting paid. Maybe I indiscreetly said something, but yeah.
Sure.
But she finally left there in disgust, I guess, probably, or moved on. I have no idea. But
she should have gone and learned to play a few different
ASL. Learned to play squad leader.
Yeah, they would have loved to have her in there. Talk about a different point of view. Oh, let's see. Yeah, here's K Bureau. I don't know how to BRW. Please have Avalon Hill guys on. That would be great. Kay, I agree 100%. So we will work on that. I want to be, got to watch out. I was trying to drop that off and I hit the wrong button. I want to be respectful of Charlie's time, and I know the cats need to be fed.
I think the cats
did they get fed?
They must have got fed because there's no cats down here. We got 3 cats, so they all took off. With I didn't even know it, but I bet my wife fed the poor little starving cats.
Beautiful. Thank her. Thank her. But I love the cats on too. Anytime you want to come back on, you just let me know for any reason, even if you wanted to feature some artwork you were working on. Charlie, I'd love to have you on at any time. It's been a pleasure.
Well, Bart, thank you very much. It's been a thrill and an honor to be here. So hello to
my
everybody
pleasure.
out there. And yeah, if you got about $5 you don't know what to do with it in your wallet, you can throw it to me on the GoFundMe page. But
There you go. Help
this
them out.
point,
Help them out. Good. Hang on the line for me. I'm going to wrap up here. I don't have any end of music or anything. I know some of the guys have these great outros. I need to do all that, but I haven't. So I'm going to hit the end broadcast, but don't go away. You'll stay on, Charlie. I'm just going to end the live broadcast here. And thanks for everybody that commented and everybody that watched. I think we had about 27 people live at one point. So I know people roll on and off. That's great. And for those that'll watch it in post, send some comments and comment in YouTube. I'm hitting it in now.